Who is the greatest New Orleans Saint of all time? I think most of you know who that is, but today we set out to find out who that player is for this franchise, who has been in a bit of turmoil recently, but still has a very, very underrated and rich history, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Starting off at number 10 with a player on the defensive line, that would be defensive tackle Wayne Martin, a guy who had 5 double-digit sacks seasons in his career as a defensive tackle. Very, very impressive. Two-time All-Pro selection, and just a stalwart as far as a run stuffer. Great at for the New Orleans Saints in the late 80s and the early 90s. We got Sam Mills at number 9, a man who I think is a little bit overrated. I know he's somewhat a fan favorite amongst Saints fans. He played 9 seasons over there and was a very, very good linebacker at that. But I do think that if we're looking at him just overall, as far as the overall length of his career, he did have a little bit of success with the Panthers as he did with the Saints. I think that kind of diminishes what he did with New Orleans as just a player for the Saints. But still, multiple seasons of 100-plus tackles, and certainly one of the best linebackers of the decade in the 1980s. But I wouldn't go as far as to saying he was one of the best defensive players on in that decade. Certainly not on that vaunted linebacker unit that the Saints had in the 80s. But certainly a very good player in his own right. At number 8, we're going to go with another player from the 1980s, Morton Anderson, who most people remember for his game-winning field goal for the Falcons in the 1998 NFC Championship game. But he played 13 seasons before that with the New Orleans Saints, and was a 2-time first-team All-Pro selection. Definitely one of the best kickers in NFL history. Morton Anderson definitely deserves his place in Saints lore. At number 7, we're going to go with Pat Swilling, a defensive end / linebacker for the Saints. And again, you guessed it, also in the 1980s and the 1990s. He was the 1991 Defensive Player of the Year, finishing with a league-leading 17 sacks. He had 6 seasons in his career of double-digit sacks, 5 of those coming with the New Orleans Saints, and was a 4-time All-Pro and a 2-time first-team All-Pro selection. Certainly one of the best linebackers / defensive ends of the early 1990s. At number 6, we're going to go with one of the most underrated players in NFL history in my eyes. That would be Marques Colston. How this man didn't make a Pro Bowl, let alone multiple, in my eyes, is just incredibly astonishing and dumbfounded. And, you know, this was a guy who had 6 1,000-yard seasons in his career, 8 seasons of 900 or more yards in his career, and was a critical and pivotal part of the Saints Super Bowl winning season in 2009, being Drew Brees' top target throughout majority of the late 2000s and the early 2010s. Helped revolutionize how NFL played offense, and certainly he could play all over the football field. Just doesn't get enough credit for how good of a player he was. He comes in at number 6 in my eyes. Number 5, I'm going to go with Jahri Evans. In my opinion, a top 10 guard of all time. 4-time first-team All-Pro selection. And, you know, he was one of the critical parts of the Saints offensive line in the late 2000s, early 2010s. In my opinion, very much is a first ballot Hall of Fame selection, and it's confusing to me that he's not already in the Hall of Fame. But just flawless technique. He had great hands, was just pretty much incredibly difficult to get around, just impossible to get around, and incredibly athletic on top of that. Perfect for what the New Orleans Saints needed for their high-volume pass attack. Just one of the best pass-protecting guards, in my opinion, in NFL history. So yes, he comes in at number 5. At number 4, we're going to go with Cam Jordan. As this video stands, he has 121.5 sacks. By far the most in, well, not by far the most. I take that back. We'll get to the other person who is on this list, but the most in New Orleans Saints history. Um, and as it stands, he has 8 Pro Bowls and 1 first team All Pro selection. What he has done for the Saints team over the last decade, being a stalwart for the franchise throughout several Super Bowl contending seasons. I think he has earned his mark on being on the Saints Mount Rushmore, and certainly one of the most terrifying pass rushers of the late 2010s. At number 3, we're going to go with Willie Roth. One of the best tackles of the 90s and the early 2000s. Played 9 seasons with the New Orleans Saints and was a 2-time first-team All-Pro selection, 5-time All-Pro with the New Orleans Saints before he moved on to the Kansas City Chiefs and had a career renaissance. Just big, absolute ginormous mammoth of a human being. Incredibly strong, incredibly hard to get around, very agile on his feet, and was just pretty much impossible to make a move on. He had spectacular hand technique. Willie Roth is one of the highlights of what was a very dormant decade for the New Orleans Saints throughout the late 1990s, especially, and he comes in for that reason at number 3. At number 2, we're going to go with Ricky Jackson. Ricky Jackson finished his career with 136 sacks. So Cam Jordan, very, very close to him as far as career sacks. Ricky Jackson, however, we're talking about some underrated defensive ends from the 1980s. We talked about Andre Tippett when we were talking about the New England Patriots, Mark Gastineau. Ricky Jackson definitely falls in that category for the same reason. 5-time second-team All-Pro selection. Led the league in forced fumbles 4 times in his career. Multiple double-digit sack seasons. If I'm not mistaken, I think he had 7 with the New Orleans Saints. And was just great at also just being a run stuffer and an overall tackle, and was really all over the place. Could play as both an off-the-ball linebacker as well as a pass-rushing defensive end. Very versatile player, and certainly one of the most underrated defensive ends of the late 1980s and the early 1990s. But yes, Ricky Jackson, there we go. You guys saw the stats there for Ricky Jackson. And then at number 1, I think most people know who this is going to be. Drew Brees. I mean, Drew Brees is the New Orleans Saint. Marked a new era of Saints football when he came to New Orleans in 2006 after Hurricane Katrina. Helped the city rally as they rebuilt and ended up eventually winning the Super Bowl in 2009, where he was the Super Bowl MVP. He has the most 5,000 passing yard seasons of any quarterback in NFL history, having 5 of those seasons. He's led the league in passing touchdowns 4 times in his career. He's led the league in passing yards 7 times in his career. He's led the league in completion percentage 6 times in his career, and completions 4 times in his career. He also led the league in passing yards per game 6 times in his career, and was a 2-time Offensive Player of the Year. Should have been an MVP at some point, and certainly one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. There's no doubt in my eyes, Drew Brees is the greatest New Orleans Saint of all time.